If you're someone who's passionate about transforming education, which you are if you're listening to this podcast, you should check out the Charles Koch Foundation. The Charles Koch Foundation supports social entrepreneurs and organizations that are embracing innovation to build better solutions for today's learners. Visit ckf.org to learn more. Welcome back, everybody. It's your time to EdUp on the EdUp Experience podcast, where we make education your business. Boy, am I excited today. I know I've said that before, but today I really do mean it. Not that I didn't mean it before, but I do still mean it today. I've got like doctors all over the place. I'm Dr. Joe Lucio, Dr. this, Dr. that. And we said we got on the phone and the three of us talking. It's like, doctor. Anyway, that's always fun when you're in higher ed and you're talking to just incredible high achievers. And my first time guest co-host and first time guest. This is my favorite, when I have somebody that come and co-host with me for the first time, and I have a first-time guest, because you never know what you're going to get here at the EdUp Experience. It could be a complete train wreck, which I hope for, or it could be really super polished, which what's the point of that? I mean, you could hear that anywhere. So we're going to go for train wreck today, but very positive, worthwhile, informative train wreck. I'm going to bring in my co-host. She is not only is she somebody very special and important in higher ed, she's also graduated from the same institution as I had for my doctorate. So we have all these connections. She's an attorney. She's got a JD. She got the EDD. Let me just, enough about her. Let me just bring her in. She is the amazing Dr. Heather Perfetti. She's president at the Middle States Commission on Higher Education. Heather, what is going on?
Hey, Joe, it's great to be back with you, and I appreciate the invitation, and I'm certainly pleased to be here with Dr. Erica Moore. Looking forward to our conversation and all of the insights and advice that Erica, I know, will be pushing out to your listeners. I'm so proud of your podcast and the direction you've taken it, and just thrilled to be here.
Well, I'm thrilled to have you. And what we've done now is already... typically, Heather, I bring in the guest, but since you already brought her in, I'm going to have you introduce her. And so, but I'm going to have you do it again. Ready? I'm ready. Go now. Ready? Who do we have with us today, Heather?
It's my privilege to bring to your listeners Dr. Erica Moore. I know she's going to talk with us about her breadth of experience relating to student success in general, and also to Native students. And she can talk a little bit about the agency she currently serves, but excited to have her with us for sure.
See, Heather did not know I was going to hand her the microphone to introduce Erica, but this is what is so much fun. Erica, how are you?
Hello, how are you? I'm doing good.
Are you ready for this, Erica?
Absolutely not.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you better get ready. Tell us, Erica, you are Executive Director of the Native Student Success. You are Executive Director of Native Student Success at American Indian Higher Education Consortium, which is AIHEC. Talk to us about what you do and how you do it. Level set for the audience.
Great. Thank you for introducing me, both of you. I am the Executive Director of Native Student Success at AIHEC, or American Indian Higher Education Consortium. AIHEC was created in the 70s when the first tribal colleges were opened, and they are the advocating body for the tribal colleges and Native serving institutions, and any institution with the commitment to Native students. I specifically oversee the student success team. So the research director and her data team are under myself, and we focus on initiatives like the Bill and Melinda Gates Intermediary for Scales to promote transformation throughout tribal colleges and increase student success for Native students. Thank you.
I think the most important question I can ask is this one. And that is amidst all of the DEI focus that we've had within higher education, really as a country, different ethnic people from different ethnic and backgrounds, nationalities, and so on have found a voice. you just haven't maybe not heard as much, but maybe there hasn't been as much focus on our American Indian population. Can you talk about what the population of students and the population in our country is feeling? If it's forgotten, front and center, can you give us some insight into the population of our native population, if you will?
Yeah, thanks. So I will say I can't, when I am providing my thoughts, I can't say that they're representing all Native students or Native professionals. We aren't a homogenous group, but you are correct that there is a common theme that Native students and Native peoples in general feel forgotten. In higher education, we're only 1% of the student population. And so when you hear that number, it's so low, and someone might think that that's the reason why we're forgotten, I guess, if we're gonna use that word.
Oh, that was the wrong button. I was trying to hit my yikes button because I didn't think that it was that small of a percentage, right?
Yes, but it is proportionate to the population. We are a very small population in the United States. But for example, tribal colleges service over 30,000 learners, 16 different states. That's over 200 tribal nations that we do service. And so we are important, and we should be at the forefront, as you said in the beginning. If we're forgotten or if we feel we're at the front, I think there's an ongoing trend as we see more DEI work that people are bringing us into the conversation more, which is great. So hopefully that curve continues.
Well, before I pass it to you, Heather, I just want to say that question, maybe when I'm thinking about the way I asked the question, and maybe it came out funny, but you want to be respectful of backgrounds and maybe not create scenarios with the word forgotten, like maybe nobody feels that way, or so you try to find the right words. But I think the bigger point is that our American Indian population is still a significant part of the higher ed community, and that we have to service those students in the same way we do every other student, and understanding that they might have different needs from your general population student, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think that was necessarily the wrong word to use. Sometimes we even use a stronger word, erase. We feel that history, our own history, our own culture, our own languages were actively and purposefully erased, which over the generations has made many forget that we're still here. So
thank you, Erica. So I'm going to add to the question, staying focused on the DEI work. I know that, Erica, you train and educate others in this particular area, cultural diversity, cultural sensitivity. Could you talk a little bit about that in terms of your previous work or your current work?
Yeah, great question. So I do, and I have provided culturally responsive training for educational professionals, so K through 12 and higher ed. But also I have provided that type of training here in South Dakota at medical facilities, museums, just ensuring that we are engaging with all populations appropriately and ethically. And that is so important, especially in education. We know as education professionals, students are more likely to succeed on a campus if they feel connected to it. And that's for all students, not just the population that I do work with, is Native students. So when I do provide that training, we do sort of a more general training of how to be more culturally responsible for all students, not just Native students, but it benefits my students as well.
Thanks, Erica. Before heading back over to Joe, could you talk a little bit about, based on your research and your experience, what are the challenges that this particular student population faces that you talk with other professionals about and help them to understand?
Thank you. So first, I guess I always like to be sure that I point out again that Indigenous peoples and therefore Native students are not homogenous. one of the areas that I talk about the most focuses on the research of student success for the Native population. And often researchers examine this population through a one-size-fits-all lens, which can impede our progression and change in providing those solutions for that population. Additionally, there's often not many Indigenous researchers included in that work and that research, which is a key piece missing. To understand Native students, we should be including Indigenous professionals to provide that cultural lens. But that said, I would say the majority are facing financial barriers that might prevent the access to mainstream non-tribal colleges. And then once they are there, there's this separation from their community, from their culture, and they often talk about the experiences of feeling othered and experiencing racism on campus. So it's really important I talk to campuses or educational professionals on how to combat those issues, and there's many ways that we can do that. There are state institutions that allow waivers, tuition waivers for Native students. We have great scholarship programs like grant programs to provide the students with funding, and then implementing that cultural responsive training across campus, hiring more diverse faculty and staff, incorporating the cultural courses and the cultural programming across campus. Those are just some of the things I like to talk about when I am providing that training.
You know what? Just to switch gears just for a second, and this I didn't notice it until this very second, Erica. And this is in no way an advertisement for any particular college, but all three of us have graduated from the same institution with our doctorates. For the record, I'm going to have to call Harpool over there at North Central University and tell him that he's, you know what, maybe he needs to do something for the three of us, or even bringing it up on this episode.
Right.
I'll tell you what, David Harpool, I'm going to be calling you soon. So, Erica, what one of the fascinating things that I was just kind of digging through the website as I do my research and so on, and a big part of the stories that you share and the continuous improvement is the sentence that you have in here that higher education, strengthening communities through higher ed and preserving the culture, tradition, and environment. Give me the culture, tradition, environment talk and how that's preserved through the journey of higher education for our Indigenous population.
And so our priority are often the tribal colleges and the tribal communities. Tribal colleges were built to not just provide the education, but ensuring that we're doing it our way. So the education system is often very different than the way Indigenous peoples teach and learn. We are tied heavily to our language. Our language provides almost access to the past, to what our ancestors knew about the environment, our relationship to it, to other humans, to the earth, Atabe, in my language, to animals, the Horse Nation, for example. And so when we're teaching or providing that education at a tribal college, we're trying to educate the whole human, the whole Native student, helping them reconnect if they need it to their cultural identity, bringing them up in a way that's representative of their tribal community, because all 37 of the tribal colleges are from 37 different tribal nations. And so we try to ensure that we are including that sort of community piece of that, not just the in the classroom learning. And so that's essentially what we're talking about in that statement.
And Heather, I want to bring you in, not only for to hand it over to you for questions, but maybe to ask you both this question, because this is definitely on the mind of all of us. As we look at institutions and enrollment and financial difficulties and all of these things, obviously you're in a very unique position to talk about this, Heather. How are the tribal colleges doing? And that's a question to both of you, Erica, from what you understand, and Heather, for any of those that you accredit through Mill States. Are there financial difficulties, enrollment difficulties, much like every other college is experiencing? What's sustainability and capacity look like? If you guys want to just take that one in whatever way you'd like.
So I guess I'll kick off. The Middle States Commission doesn't have tribal community or tribal colleges and universities within its membership. We certainly have HBCUs, MSIs, HSIs, and similar types of institutions. And I think what what we see across all of our institutions, especially following the pandemic, is a real reckoning for institutions to look closely at their futures, at what may be coming next for them, and where they can be more innovative and engage in better practices, especially around DEI initiatives, where they're doing exceptional work and they recognize that they can do even better, and maintaining that commitment to their mission and their students, and seeing it through in new and unique ways. And the pandemic in some ways leveraged some of those more positive experiences for institutions. Erica?
Yeah, so I will say, just off of the last piece that Dr. Petty just mentioned, that with the pandemic, there have been some, if we want to call them positive changes. Prior, there were several tribal colleges who were not able to offer online learning through their accreditation. And once the pandemic hit, the accrediting bodies were forced to shift and allow them to teach online to reach the students. And they saw that they were quite capable. And so many of them are moving in that direction now because of the way in which they had to adapt during the pandemic. As far as some of the, I guess, issues that tribal colleges face that might be different than mainstream non-tribal institutions, would be often their location. So many of the tribal colleges are in more isolated areas. So that means less access to broadband. It provides issue with the online learning. And active resources with technology. And so many states are pushing with AIHEC at pushing those legislative priorities for expanding broadband. Another issue is that tribal colleges often don't allow for student loans for their students, because our student population has one of the highest rates of defaulting, because it can be much more difficult to pay back those student loans for Native students. So it even lessens the financial ability for the college to assist with the student's education or obtaining that education. Being isolated also provides issues with the lack of faculty or staff. We can't always fill all of the positions, which is one of the reasons why AIHEC is working to create a course sharing network between all 37 of the institutions, so that if there is any area where one tribal college is not able to fulfill, and typically we see that in the maths and sciences, they would be able to share those courses from another tribal college. So there are initiatives that we're pushing to help in those areas, but those are some of the issues that they face. Additionally, many are tied to the tribe. So they have to meet tribal government, state and federal policies, and align with accreditation. So sometimes that can be difficult to manage.
Too many learners are being left behind by the current one-size-fits-all model of education. We here at EdUp and our friends at the Charles Koch Foundation see a better path forward. The Charles Koch Foundation supports innovators in education who are building and scaling new pathways to allow all learners to discover their potential. By changing the way we think about education, we can unlock opportunities for millions more Americans. To learn more about the Charles Koch Foundation support of individualized education, visit ckf.org.
So Erica, hearing some of what you shared, I was thinking about, advocacy initiatives. There are certainly distinctions among the institutions, and you just detailed for us some of those impacting tribal colleges, universities, and communities, especially with the pandemic. So what do you see as some of the advocacy support or initiatives that others can undertake to support the work that you or your organization does on behalf of students?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I would say
that's one of the ones I gave you, right, Heather? One of the questions
That's right. It did come from you.
Yeah, I was going to say that sounds like a Joe question for sure.
he wanted to make sure he got that correct.
Yeah, I was like, Heather, make sure you ask this really good question. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, so as some of the initiatives I just had talked about previously are some of the broader ways we can. So as I mentioned, really lobbying to support legislative policies like the Title III funding, expanding broadband in those isolated areas, non-beneficiary funding at the state level for tribal colleges. What that just means is some states do not provide funding, beneficiary funding to tribal colleges. And tribal colleges still support and provide education services to non-Native students, but we only receive funding for our Native student count. So there's this large piece of a funding gap that tribal colleges face as well. So pushing legislative change at the state level for non-beneficiary funding would be great, increasing Title III funding, the broadband, as I mentioned. Unfortunately, we were pushing for the Build Back Better because that increased much of the financial funding for the tribal colleges, but that's we are not sure how that'll go yet. So really pushing that legislative change. If you're an administrator on a campus, create best practices and push for change. Make it a priority of yours to make a culturally responsive campus, one that supports all students and supports and uplifts diversity and inclusion. And listen and believe our students when they say they're facing these obstacles. Don't try to gaslight them and make them feel like that's not what their lived experience is. Or help a student if you see one in need that needs someone to help, just even how difficult it can be for our students to fill out scholarship applications and or the FAFSA applications. So if you want to be involved, there are so many ways to be involved, and you can reach out to organizations like my own to see how you can play a larger role. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is the part of the episode, Erica, where we like to have a little bit of fun. In fact, I don't know if I mentioned it. I think I meant to mention it, but I didn't. It went in my brain and then disappeared. Is that Dr. Heather Perfetti was our 72nd guest? I mean, not 72nd, but you were the guest on our 72nd episode. Isn't that right, Heather?
It is right.
And since then, we've changed the format a little bit. And so we're going to do that now. We're going to play a little game called Higher Ed Word Association.
Oh.
You like that? Who's ready to win no money? Anybody ready to win no money? So I'm going to give you guys a word, and you're going to give me your one word or several word response when you hear this. And we're going to go with Heather first, because obviously she's the guest co-host, so I got to give the guest the most time to think about it. You ready, Heather?
I'm ready.
Degree.
Degree. Empowering students with credentials that are fulfilling within their lives.
I like that. Dr. Erica Moore.
Degree. I can't go after that.
Degree. You're going to have to.
That was too good. Degree. I see a degree as another way to help change a Native student's trajectory in life, and a way to bring back knowledge to the tribal communities. So I loved the use of the word empowering.
I'd say that's a pretty good answer. All right, here we go. Number 2, Dr. Perfetti, liberal arts.
Liberal arts. And why did I have to go first again? I thought maybe that time it would go to Erica, but
you can pin me down after the episode.
I'll take it. Liberal arts. I'm going to use the word empowering again, because it is empowering students to think deeply and critically, which will prepare them for whatever career path they take and for whatever their futures hold.
Erica.
Oh, you always have such great answers. How do I go after that? Liberal arts. I guess one word doesn't come to my mind, but I think liberal arts is so critical to developing our students as a whole human, and encouraging critical thinking and emotional intelligence, and expanding how we engage with others. So many things come to my mind.
All right, so if you guys are having fun with this, we'll do 2 more, but if you want to move on, we can. It's up to you.
We can do it, but make them easier.
All right, ready? We'll go with you first this time, Erica. Enrollment.
So interesting. So for a native student, when we say enrollment, and we always get this little laugh, we ask if they're enrolled, and they often think we're talking about their enrollment in the federal government, in their tribe, or enrolled in the courses. So I feel like it's being a part of something, whether it is a college campus or your tribal community.
Dr. Perfetti, enrollment.
So I'm going to stick with the empowerment theme, because I think that it applies here too.
Before you answer, I gotta get something ready, because it feels like you've answered with the same word 3 times. But we're gonna give it to you anyway. We need a judgment. We're gonna give it to you. Go ahead.
I think that enrollment is about empowering students, getting them connected. Institutions are so closely connected and tied with their communities. And so it's getting them connected to the college or university community, getting them better connected to the community in which the institution sits. And it certainly is positioning them to expand holistically as a student. So I know institutions maybe think about enrollment differently and have enrollment targets, but I'm going to stick with my theme of empowering, because I think it applies here too, especially in the context of what we're talking about.
I love it. Last one, and we'll go to you, Erica, one more time. Online learning.
Opportunity. I think it opens the door for so much more, less restriction in the way we learn.
Heather, online learning.
Empowering.
That's right. I'm not going to stick with it this time. I'm going to go with instead the thought of it being relatively controversial. And I know that Erica was talking about the transition during the pandemic, where institutions that maybe did not have online teaching and learning experience at their institutions had to make pretty significant shifts. But as a result of those shifts, she is right, there have been made more opportunities, but it still, I think, is somewhat controversial across higher education, although many of us have been engaged in online or distance education for many, many years, but it has been new to some institutions.
Well, that concludes this episode of Higher Ed Word Association. All right, Heather, we're back over to you for our normal questions, but I want to know, do you guys like Higher Ed Word Association? I think it's like my new jam. I'm totally into it.
I love it.
I thought it was fun. Yeah,
I feel like you do a whole episode, just come up with like 10 words, bring on 3-4 people, give it to them. And like true academics, no one can ever get it down to one word. We all write dissertations with our responses. And I love it. Heather, over to you.
Thank you. I think we could do something with acronyms as part of your game show too.
Oh, now you're cooking. I love it.
I'm not good with the acronyms.
So I guess I would present to Erica if she could talk a little bit about where she sits in terms of celebrating the work around Native students, something that we could take away that's very positive. And then also maybe talk a little bit about what's been frustrating in carrying the weight of this kind of work.
Well, the first part of that question is asking how we celebrate, or things that we can be celebrating. I just want to
what would you celebrate as a leader in this particular area? What are you proud of? What would you want the audience to know? What would you want us to celebrate with you about this work?
I celebrate the existence of my students every day because it's been so difficult to get to where they are, even if it is the first semester, their first year at college. That is so important, not just for themselves, but most of them are first generation. The communities are often so proud of them, and they come back and they bring so much to the communities when they finish the degree. So we love to celebrate that our students exist and they keep persisting, even if it takes them longer to finish the degree than the average student. Just celebrating them every day is really important. But outside of that, we are doing amazing things. Our students, we're creating the partnerships with universities like UND, who has an Indigenous health program with Dr. Warren. And we have such exciting work being done with our doctoral students who are examining the ice structures in the Arctic based on their, research on climate change. We have students working to decolonize biology curriculum. We have doctoral students working on plant life and how the medicinal uses to move back to our traditional knowledge, but still incorporate that into the medical field today. We have a 10-week program coming up that's going to help students virtually learn new ways to incorporate research skills, how to interpret that, how to communicate and storytell to get others interested in the work that we're doing. There's just so much that's going on across the country, and oftentimes you don't hear about it, and we hear more about the deficit when we talk about Native students. So it's really important for many of us to really uplift our students and celebrate even the tiniest of milestones, so that they don't remain forgotten, that they don't feel erased, and that they know they can do it, and that there's others already doing it out there. I think that was the first part of the question. What was the second part?
The second was to share with us what has been frustrating in carrying the work that you do.
I think frustrating, we often have to, our students have been facing these barriers and obstacles in education, K through 12 to higher ed, for decades, more than decades. And we still see such very slow progress on mainstream campuses to provide the resources and tools and assistance that will close the equity gaps of just enrollment and persistence and graduation. So it's really frustrating that the progress is so slow, but as the professional in those positions sitting at the table, we're often interrogated and treated as if we have to do so much to even convince the non-Indigenous professionals that this is important, or that it's an issue, or that something should be done. So that can be extremely frustrating. It can be even more frustrating if you're in a state that does not promote diversity. And so we do see that in some states that shall not be named, that are taking diversity out of their state schools. This prevents us from, obtaining federal grants that have anything to do with diversity inclusion or decolonization or indigenization. So there's just so many ways that it can be frustrating. That's why we often want to look at the positive.
That was a good question, Heather.
It was.
Enlighten me a little on, Erica, you talked about, at one point you said something like the American Indian Higher Education Consortium is going to serve as almost like a shared services for all the, I think you said there were 30 plus tribal colleges and universities, right? Can you talk about the model of support and how are you all working together and sharing resources and so on? Because that's what higher ed is striving towards in many ways. And there are other consortiums out there that are doing similar things, and shared resources and in consortiums is, I'd say, in a growing trend, and Heather would know probably better than me, but you look at the landscape and there is an attractiveness to share. Can you talk about how that model works a little bit?
Sure. We're still creating sort of that infrastructure, but there are 35 accredited standalone tribal colleges, 2 that we refer to as developing or emerging. They're working on their accreditation. And then there's 75 campuses. So non-standalone, but affiliated tribal colleges that have their accreditation through another tribal college or institution. Essentially, we are trying, I'll just give an example. So some that are smaller don't have access to STEM faculty. So oftentimes it takes those students much longer than the average student to complete because they're constantly waiting for that tribal college to get an adjunct professor that can teach that course. Oftentimes, some of the tribal colleges do not have full language programs, and so they have to rely on the partnerships with the other tribal colleges. Right now, we're working on a way to have a course sharing network between all 37 tribal colleges and their 75 campuses so that we can essentially create almost like a learning management system that allows all 37 to share or gain access to one another's courses. That way our students aren't, their education journey is not impeded or slowed in any way because they're waiting for their specific institution. We think this will also be part of our virtual learning initiatives that we're trying to help the colleges that don't have that infrastructure for virtual learning, online learning. So it's going to be a dual approach, but it will include all of the tribal colleges, AIHEC, our partners, our sister organizations like the College Fund. So we do heavily rely on partnerships and collaborations. Community practice is definitely very important for the work that AIHEC does with the tribal colleges. So yeah, that's what that looks like, but it's the starting sort of phase of this work.
That's exciting. It's exciting to start that out.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Heather, do you have any more questions for the amazing Erica Moore before we go to our final 2 questions of the episode?
So I guess just as a follow-up to some of what you were sharing, Erica, it sounds like there is an increasing trend of innovation. And I know that often higher education is accused of not being innovative or being slow to change. What has your experience been like in terms of supporting that kind of innovative work?
We've had great, it can be very slow, but also really exciting. So I did mention in one of the first questions that we're working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. There's so many that are a part of that. They are bringing together all of the institutions and organizations that act as advocates for HBCUs, HSIs, MSIs, NSIs, and tribal colleges, community colleges, land-grant institutions. And the funding is going to support those areas of innovation and areas of need like technical assistance. So essentially, we're creating really in-depth like institutional research departments for the tribal colleges. We're providing, with the help of the foundation and the service providers and partners, to provide that technical assistance, providing the data collecting software, assisting with how we interpret and disseminate that data. There's just so many ways that we're all working together to scale up, as they refer it, or transform our organization so that we can work more efficiently and more effectively to support all 30 of our 37 institutions. So there's so many ways that I see that the innovation is happening, and it's exciting, and I see everyone's really getting involved. And every day we have another organization reaching out. How can we get involved? How can we partner? So if it was slow before, I have a strong feeling we're going to see an upward trend for sure.
Wow. I love it. That's a wow button. That's wow. I think you did a great job answering that question. And of course, we end every episode with the same 2 questions for every guest. Number 1, Erica, what did we not say? Better, maybe put it this way. What did Heather forget to ask you? Because, of course, I didn't forget anything about the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. Of course, Heather didn't forget anything either. But I'd like to give her a hard time since she's here. What did we forget to ask you? Anything that you want to say? Any plugs that you want to make? Website, events coming up, anything at all? Use it as your couple of minutes to just shout it out. Anything that you want, the mic is yours. And secondarily to that, what do you see as the future of higher education?
I think Heather did a perfect job with her questions. Thank you very much. But
Right.
Exactly.
I will give a quick plug to one of my colleagues' initiatives that she's working on, the Astronet Institute. It provides academic development and enrichment activities, basically improving the critical thinking and problem solving. They're recruiting right now for the next 2 cohorts with classes beginning April 1st and June 1st and August 1st. And students are paid to attend the 10-week virtual program. So they are given a $1,000 stipend. And you can contact me or anyone at AIHEC to find out more about how you can get involved. And the second question is awesome as well. What will the future of education hold? I'll just end with my hope for Native students are improved services on mainstream college campuses, increased funding and resources for tribal colleges, and a society that learns to support, empower, and encourage our Native student populations.
Well, there you have it. Heather, what'd you think of all this?
I thought it was awesome. And I thought our guests provided some exceptional information. And like you noted, Joe, at the outset, I think our listeners may be less familiar with the student population and some of the work being done. So I applaud Erica and the work of her organization.
Yeah, and Erica, we're going to do everything we can to when we put this episode out, to make it as loud and visible as possible to support you and your work. But first, before I outro you here, Erica, let me outro my amazing first-time guest host. Hopefully not first time, right? Hopefully next time, Heather, you've got an open invitation to come back anytime you want, and I hope you do. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Heather Perfetti.
Thank you, Joe.
She's president of Mill State's Commission on Higher Ed. It's an honor to have you, Heather. Thank you.
It's been great to be here. And as always, I look forward to coming back again.
You will. Open door. And of course, our amazing guest today. She's even more amazing now that I got a chance to get to know her. Very impressive. Please check out her and her work. You can follow either of these amazing women on LinkedIn. They are not hard to find. Just look them up. My guest today, Dr. Erica Moore. She's Executive Director of Native Student Success at the American Indian Higher Education Consortium. Erica, thank you so much for coming on today. It's been an honor to talk with you.
Thank you for having me today.
Ladies and gentlemen, you've just EdUp'd. The purpose of education is to help learners discover their aptitudes and interests, develop their skills, and then deploy that knowledge to benefit themselves and others. The Charles Koch Foundation, a nonprofit grant-making organization, works with leaders in education to remove barriers that stand in the way of all learners reaching their potential. They support individualized and flexible models that improve access and quality for millions of Americans. They also support apprenticeship and upskilling programs that connect learners to in-demand jobs that match their skills and interests. The foundation is looking for new partners to challenge the status quo and transform the post-secondary education system. Learn more about their partnership opportunities and apply for a grant at ckf.org. You can also find them on Twitter at C. Koch Foundation and LinkedIn by searching Charles Koch Foundation.